Hello, I'm Glenn Fay, Education Director at CIS. For years, maths achievement has been in steep decline in Australia, highlighted by our poor PISA results as well as our own CIS research. With this in mind, we invited one of our nation's leading educators, Eddie Wu, to give us his take on how to raise the bar. In addition to his WooTube channel, Eddie teaches high school maths, is leader of mathematics growth for the New South Wales Department of Education, and is Education Ambassador at Sydney University. Please enjoy his presentation.
I'd love to pose a very simple question to you. We're going to have a really broad-ranging conversation tonight, so Glenn has promised, and I'm very nervous. However, I'd like to make sure that we have our laser focus on the core of our discussion today, which is not just mathematics, the subject, the discipline, the study, but what is the thing within mathematics and what is the kind of mathematics that matters? And we'll see how we go. I have a close eye on the clock, and I think Glenn will grab me with a shepherd's crook if I go over, but I'll be ambitious and I'll see if we can even taste and experience some of that rather than just hear about it from me. So, my question to all of you, which normally I would throw to the floor if I had the luxury of time, is what do you think is the mathematics that matters? Mathematics is as diverse a subject as music or history or English, full of genres and areas of study. And yet I think that most of us often identify a particular branch of mathematics that we think is the mathematics that matters. I certainly remember when here in New South Wales, we were implementing new stage 6 syllabuses, and during the consultation period, it seemed like we were doomed to see another syllabus created by a committee that really had no singular vision around it because everything was someone's baby. Every part of mathematics mattered to someone, and so it was exceedingly difficult to answer this question for a broad education system. Now, to prompt and provoke your thinking about this, what I'd like to suggest to you is actually not a musical or historical or a literary illustration, but, well, I have young children. This is about dinner time for me, so I would like to go in the direction of a culinary illustration. I don't know how many of you, in fact, I'm going to ask the question because you can just raise your hand. How many of you enjoy cooking? Hands up. And how many of you enjoy eating cooking? Yep, thank you. Okay, you passed the first test. You're awake enough to answer that question. When I think about cooking, I notice the fact that I am not a skilled cook. I can blame the fact that my agricultural high school, which I very much enjoyed, did not offer food technology or hospitality. It's just an excuse, but one of the things which I've since learned at a school which does really put into its culinary and hospitality programs is when it comes to learning how to cook, there are two distinct areas that really need to be looked after. The first one is, I guess, what we would call the cuisines. And of course, we know what cuisines are, especially in a city like this or a country like this. You can think about Italian cuisine. Probably Japanese is my favorite. Indian, or if you really want to be very high cultured, you could go for Australian cuisine. Really, whatever floats your boat. Now, if you want to be a chef, you need to master cuisines, but that's not enough. Because to be a skilled chef, there is a series of core skills that no matter which cuisine you are cooking, you must master. For example, how to wield a knife, how to control heat in a pan, how to make sure that you are balancing the right flavors and adjusting as you go. And then, of course, because we all eat with our eyes, how to plate up and present. And I guess we could say from cuisines to skills, these are two inseparable things that a chef must learn. What does this have anything to do with mathematics? I wonder if you can see the metaphor and the line I'm trying to draw. Though we don't call them cuisines, they may as well be by a different name. In mathematics, we have all of these different content or topic areas. Perhaps you want to go for geometry or networks or algebra or data and statistics. These are often what we think of as the different areas of mathematics, the content. But at the same time, at least say, for example, here in New South Wales, we would say no matter which topics you are looking at, there is a set of core skills. The New South Wales syllabus calls them working mathematically. Within ACARA's curriculum, we would call them the proficiency strands. Fluency, understanding, problem solving, reasoning, justification, and communicating. Now, for me, these are at the core, But importantly, these are not two things to separate. Often in our dialogue around education, and particularly mathematics, there's a push to separate these things. Do we have a curriculum that focuses on knowledge, or is it one that focuses on skills? Regardless of which century they seem to belong to, they often get labeled 21st, despite being, I think, arguably useful long time before we hit this century. For me, I think about the words of E.D. Hirsch, who said, "Content is skill, and skill is content." These are two things that are united, and I personally resist the false dichotomy that's made between them, even though they're distinct. Now, as I said, I was going to be bold and ambitious, and I wanted to do more than just sort of introduce this idea to you. I wonder if you could think about with me why this really matters. What is it that's specific and unique about mathematics that sets it apart? Well, I love science. One of the things about it is that its form of knowledge, its epistemological basis, is repeated observation and experimentation. We can do a lot with science, but it's important to recognize that this does not cut it in the mathematics classroom. You can give me millions of triangles, all of whose angles add up to 180 degrees, and that still does not constitute anything like what we would call proof. Nonetheless, science is powerful, but you can't use it for everything, can you? When we think about history, I loved history as a child. It was actually the subject that I spent most time on, mostly because of all the reading. But you cannot repeat history and observe it. So we use sources, we weave a narrative thread that makes sense of all of the things together, and we say, well, does this, on analysis, actually give us a satisfying explanation for what happened? And this is what constitutes historical proof. But unlike any of these, mathematics alone uses just one power: deductive reasoning. There is something wonderfully democratic about mathematics, that it doesn't require any pedigree or equipment. It takes a mind, a human mind, and that's it. Now, as I mentioned before, this role of reasoning isn't just something within New South Wales or Australia. If you go over to the US or the UK, you can see it right there. Adaptive reasoning. Down here, from of qual, reason, make deductions and inferences to draw conclusions. For me, this is the mathematics that matters, and the way that we get there is going to depend on the context, our students, and what our time, what our culture is going to require of it. Particularly, for example, in a global pandemic, where we're being introduced to logarithmic scales and R numbers and a whole different suite of things, which most of us here in the room, eyeballing our average age, didn't really encounter, even if we did very advanced mathematics at school. So, I wonder if you would indulge me, in the 3 minutes I have left, to play a brief game to see if you can hold on to this with me. Not just hear about it, but actually, to take my culinary metaphor, taste. I'd like you to turn to the person closest to you. You're going to need to be paired up to play this brief little game. And between the two of you, I'm going to ask you to do something which normally is considered bad etiquette at an event, which is to get out your phone. Now, between the two of you who are seated next to each other, and if you have a friend or if you're about to introduce yourself to a stranger, I'd love one of you who can get their phone out to just open up to where you can write a text. You don't need to write a text to anyone, though if you hit send on what we're about to do, they may end up very confused. Now, what I'd like you to do between the two of you is, you're going to help me come up with some numbers, okay? Here's the way it's going to work. Choose between the two of you who will be the first player, and I'd like that person to choose a number between 1 and 4, and then just write it on your phone. 1, 2, 3, or 4. Go ahead and write it anywhere on your phone. Once you've done that, it isn't secret, so you can actually show the person you're playing with. Now, player 1 by now has chosen a number. Player 2, could I ask you to raise your hand once you know what your opponent's number is? Okay, I'll know you're ready when half the room has their hands up. Okay, fabulous, thank you. If you just raise your hand, you're player 2, and you're going to do something very similar to player 1. You're also going to choose a number between 1 and 4, but you're going to add that number on to whatever number your new friend, just told you. So for instance, if player 1 had chosen the number 2, and you have chosen the number 3, what I'd like you to now write down, just so you don't have to keep it in your memory, is 2 plus 3, which is 5. Can you go ahead, player 2, and write your new number? You can choose whatever you like, as long as it's between 1 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Now, this is the way the game is going to go back and forth. But you only need to know one more rule to play this game and complete it, which is the rule that tells you how to win this game. Because I did tell you you were opponents, and one of you is about to win this game. Here's the way it works. The astute among you will have noticed this game has a name. It is called the game of 23. One of you eventually is going to be the one who can write down the number, type the number 23. That person, after a certain number of terms, they will be crowned the winner. We only have enough time for one game, which upsets me because we could learn a lot more if we played a few. But will you please indulge me for the next 60 seconds, go back and forth until someone hits 23. And then wave your hand at me when someone wins, please. I presume by now there are winners and there are losers. I won't make you self-identify, it's fine. Here's what I'd like you to do with me. Have a look at your phone where you played that game and look at the numbers that you both typed. I have an important question to ask of you that requires you to see those numbers. Here's the question. Would you please raise your hand if, at any point during the game, your opponent, the person you're playing against, raise your hand if they ever typed the number 18. Did this happen to anyone? Hands up. It should have been a few of you at least. Okay, a few hands. All right, thank you. Hands down, right? Now, if this didn't happen to you, just play pretend with me. Imagine that it did, okay? Now, if it did, I'm just going to make a prediction about what happened between you when this took place in the game. Your friend wrote down the number 18. They passed the phone to you, and then you looked for a moment, and then you paused. And then you said, Greg, I know we've just met. I like you, but I don't want to play this game anymore, right? Because what you've realized is, having written down 18, your friend, well, they're not your friend anymore, are they? They've just won. Because there is nothing you can do, no number you can choose that will stop them winning the game. Now, for me, this is the mathematics that matters. Mathematics that helps me understand why is it that, in fact, this was not at all the game of 23, was it? It was actually a game all along about 18. Except if you're starting to realize now that I lied to you when I introduced the game, if the game of 23 is not really about 23, it's about 18, then perhaps the cogs are turning and you've realized a game of 18 is not about 18 either. In fact, it's about something much earlier, which I will leave as an exercise to the reader for you to discover.